And we're back, talking about the counter-guardian turned heroic spirit Shirou Emiya. Now, let's get into how strong this man really is. He's not your run-of-the-mill servant though. Contrary to what you may think, he actually doesn't possess any noble phantasms that he can call his own. Instead, he has a reality marble called Unlimited Bladeworks, Infinite Creation of Swords. It's referred to as a high-class thaumaturgy, which is Greek for miracle, and that becomes a reflection of his inner self in the form of a bounded field, meaning that each version of Shirou's Unlimited Bladeworks will be completely different from each other as they're a representation of their state of mind, molded by how they've experienced life and how they view the world. To the average viewer, it's a minor detail to notice, but it holds a lot of meaning. If you compared pre-heroic spirit Shirou's to counter-guardian Emiya's, you'll notice how grim Emiya's is. It's described as being enveloped by a thick haze formed from embers of black smog rising from the ground. The world is littered with weapons and flames, and giant gears fill the sky as if to represent his feelings of helplessness as he's forced to continuously kill as a counter-guardian. It's like he feels he's become a subservient machine with no free will, rather than being a hero. But Shirou's, on the other hand, is much more vibrant. It's described as being bathed in twilight. The sun shines through and clouds sparsely fill the sky. This Shirou still believes in the goals and ideals that are worth fighting for. It's a much more hopeful state of mind. Also, apparently Alter Shirou's is much cloudier because he's a bit more corrupted, and then Miyuverse Shirou's is snowy since he's only focused on saving a single person. It's a nice visual representation to show the contrast between how each Shirou feels about themselves. But anyway, this is Shirou's magecraft, his one and only specialization. As someone who's actually merged with a sword and has dedicated his life to acting as one, it's a magic that fits him perfectly. As you already know though, in order for the bounded field to be activated, he must first chant his incantation. Though they start off the same, the incantation for Shirou and Archer Emiya are both different from each other. Emiya's has a much more dread tone to it, referring to his existence as a counter-guardian as a fruitless one. Shirou, on the other hand, focuses on his determination to become a hero of justice by dedicating himself to this magecraft. Just by reading from the 4th line onward, you can sense the strength in his ideals that will eventually lead him down the path of despair. I wonder at what point as a counter-guardian does he decide to change his incantation. It's like, that would be the moment that you could pinpoint Shirou's realization of regret on the path that he chose. Now that the logistics have been explained, what does this reality marble actually do? Other than act as the #1 counter to Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon, as the name dictates, it's literally a collection of an unlimited number of weapons that could be created and projected at any time. Shirou basically works like a human photocopier. Every defensive or offensive weapon that he has ever come across, whether it be a basic sword or a noble phantasm, their history, design, and composition are instantly and perfectly noted. All Emiya needs to do is simply glance in the direction of a weapon, then he can immediately reproduce and project it. Once it has been projected, it will be stored forever in the reality marble, allowing for him to call upon it at any time that he chooses. There are a few limitations to this ability though. Like, Emiya can't just look at the specs for a conceptual sword and then make it in reality. The marble relies on his physical senses to provide the information necessary to reproduce it. Now, I know what you're thinking. This has got to be one of the strongest abilities that a servant has. And yeah, I'm honestly thinking so too. All this man needs to do is just look at your weapon, literally any weapon, and then it's his, along with all the combat skills and techniques that come with mastering it. However, as overpowered as Unlimited Bladeworks may seem, these weapons are still just copies of the original, meaning that they'll never quite be at the same strength as the originals due to the inability to fully conceptualize a weapon through only sense. So, if Shirou had to fight the original owner of a noble phantasm that he copied with that same noble phantasm, then he'd probably lose. Avalon is the only known weapon that he can perfectly project since it existed within him for a period of time. The reality marble also doesn't need to activate the bounded field in order for projections to be made. Weapons can be summoned from Unlimited Bladeworks directly to his hands or even fired as projectiles at any moment. This is why Shirou is such a good counter to Gilgamesh. Even though Gilgamesh has a seemingly infinite supply of weapons in his treasury, Shirou can just recognize the exact same weapons as Gil and fire them right back. Although it takes a bit of time in the real world to produce a weapon from the reality marble, while in the Unlimited Bladeworks, all the weapons are already there in physical form, giving Shirou the upper hand since he can summon his weapons faster. It's simply a matter of choosing, then they'll instantly appear either in his hand or ready to be shot in a massive barrage. A few examples of some notable noble phantasms that are within Unlimited Bladeworks are Saber's Avalon, Caliburn and Excalibur, Gawain's Excalibur, Ku's Gay Bolg, Nero's Istis Estis, Heracles' 9 Lives, Medea's Rulebreaker, Isis' Ro Ias, and a whole bunch more, especially from Gilgamesh's arsenal. so it's pretty crazy to think that Shirou can just use these whenever he wants. It's not like it's even a jack of all trades, master of none type situation. He can bring out the full potential of the weapon, it's just not as strong as the original. Now you'd think that'd be everything, but there's still more to this reality marvel. There's a weird interaction that happens between Avalon and Unlimited Blade Works when Shirou gets injured. Instead of the normal accelerated regeneration, Shirou's wounds are healed by, and I quote, changing his muscles into blades in order to knit his wounds with swords. Yep, he literally gets healed by self-stitching swords when he's injured. They take the place of his old muscle fibers and reinforce the body, which is a pretty useful ability to have, but could also be considered a double-edged sword. It may be pretty helpful at first, especially for minor injuries, but if the marble's sword healing, yeah, I made that up, if it's pushed too far, it can very well overwhelm Shirou and prove fatal. Alright, so that's his specialty, but he also has a bunch of other miscellaneous things that makes him even stronger. For one, his cloak and mantle are conceptual weapons that actively resist negative effects in his surroundings. His lack of fame as a hero makes him an unknown existence to other servants. He can reinforce any of the weapons he projects by filling openings of their inner structure with magical energy. The reinforcement buffs the weapon's purpose of existence, so in Emiya's case, it would be to make them sharper, stronger, and more durable. It is through this filling of magical energy that Shirou can also bring a noble phantasm back to its true strength by using it as a broken phantasm. He essentially packs as much magical energy into the weapon as possible, resulting in an unstable creation that will detonate on first impact. This is especially favorable for Emiya since none of his noble phantasms are actually his. For a normal servant, if they were to activate their noble phantasm as a broken one, it would exceed its normal strength, but also be destroyed after that one use. Whereas Shirou can just constantly recreate it over and over again, given that he has enough magical energy. Then there's his trusty twin swords, Kensho and Bakuya, the weaponized representations of yin and yang. There's a whole story around the origin of these swords, but I think what's more important is what they symbolize. They're essentially swords that have no purpose. They were created for the sake of creating something, and were not meant to be better than any other weapon or become wielded by a hero. These swords practically embody Counter Guardian Shirou's current beliefs. They both don't have the will to do anything. They're just sort of there, existing for eternity, and waiting to be used. It could just be a coincidence that they ended up pairing up with each other after Emiya having come across them at some point in his life, but Shirou chooses to fight with them not because of what they represent, but because he finds their craftsmanship to be very much appealing. The swords are also well suited to the way that he fights. They are noble phantasms on their own, but not very strong ones when compared to others. They increase magic and physical resistance, as well as have a natural attraction to each other. So if one was thrown while the other is being held, the thrown one will return like a boomerang. They can also be modified into long swords with some reinforcement magic, or my personal favorite, bayoneted handguns with his Ultra version. He can also project more than 25 pairs at a time and just overwhelm you with the sheer number of swords. But his go-to move is called the triple-linked crane wings, where he only summons 3 pairs and uses a combination of long-range projectiles and close-quarter strikes to cover every angle and make it impossible for his 3-pronged attack to miss. It's a move you'd expect from someone who's had all eternity to hone their skills. Imagine if he did this with some of the more powerful noble phantasms in his arsenal. Now, that'd be something to see, but we don't want to make him too OP. Now, in case you forgot, he is still an archer, and he does have a bow, but it's his own original weapon. He crafted it himself to be just strong enough to fire noble phantasms or broken phantasms. He uses it in combination with clairvoyance, aka Hawkeye, to perform ultra long range sniping. His range that provides pinpoint accuracy is 4 kilometers, regardless of whether the target is moving or not. He can even fire a single arrow that can then alter its course mid-air so that it strikes 2 people at once. As for his magecraft, we already know about his reinforcement and projection magic, but he also has magic detection and magic resistance, though it's very weak. When up against a caster, any high tier spell would prove to be fatal if they hit him directly. Even if he did have the increased magic resistance from Kensho and Bakuya, it'd still do severe damage. And finally, there's the basic skills like Eye of the Mind, which refers to Shirou's ability to observe and analyze a situation so that he can predict his opponent's moves, as well as the Independent Action skill, which refers to his ability to survive without constant support from his master. And that, my friends, is Archer Emiya in a nutshell. A very lengthy nutshell. Honestly, now that I understand who he is and what he's capable of a bit more, I think I have a greater appreciation for him as a character. There's certainly a lot more depth than I had previously thought, and though he may not be our first thought as one of the more powerful servants, I think he can hold his own in that upper echelon. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to vote in the community poll for the servant that you want covered next. But as always, if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you don't need me to tell you what to do. So until next time, ciao!